Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rebecca Watkins, your host for today. And today we have a very insightful discussion planned. So let me share the context with you before we begin. Teal, in partnership with Dell Technologies, brings to you startups changing the definition of work, immersive, inclusive, and secure than ever. A tailor-made thought leadership discussion on the ongoing trends that are reshaping the workplace of the future for startups specifically. In this discussion, we will be covering the following points. How are startups challenging the status quo in business? How do they make work inclusive? How do they balance growth and scalability and the ethos of the organization? And what is their future idea of future work? So ladies and gentlemen, today we have some great leaders joining us as part of this discussion. But before I introduce them, I'd like to share a few data points about the startup ecosystem in India. India is now the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. The figures are rising every moment, and soon we'll reach the top with formidable startups on our sleeves. A total of 57,000 Indian startups have been launched till date. And this proves that Indians are thinking creatively about existing problems. Shark Tank India proves that we're not behind on practical and business solutions. Currently, there are around 5,000 funded startups in India, and these numbers are growing at a promising rate. We have over 100 unicorns and counting. So ladies and gentlemen, Teal is glad to share these stats with you, and as a startup, we feel proud to share the numbers and are motivated to work and continue the hustle. We believe much of the greatness is yet to arrive for Indian startups. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we have an eminent panel for the discussion with successful startup founders and business leaders. Please welcome Sakshi, founder and MD at Myles. Sakshi is an entrepreneur with expertise in travel and transportation. She also has a passion for shared economy, advising early stage businesses, and angel investing. Sakshi started her career with FinNoble Advisors, working in the field of new business opportunities, and she joined Cars on Rent in 2007 as part of its marketing team. She's been a driving force behind the success of various Cars on Rent brands, and Sakshi can be credited with introducing this novel concept to India when renting and driving a car was a rare feat. She founded Myles, India's first self-drive service across 21 cities with nearly 250 plus pickup locations. So please welcome her to the panel. Let's also welcome to the panel Rajat Kumar, co-founder and COO of Chqbook. Rajat started his career with Standard Chartered Bank and evolved into the role of zonal head for South India. He then worked with IndusInd Bank to understand the Indian banking systems. And before Chqbook, Rajat also founded a firm that provided investment advice to its customers. Chqbook is a Gurugram and Bengaluru-based fintech startup, and Chqbook is India's first neobank with small business owners offering world-class financial services through its 5 pillars: banking, lending, insurance, khata, and rewards. Chqbook's vision is to make India's small business owners financially fitter. So let's give him a warm welcome. Let's welcome to the panel Sudiip Goswami, Director and General Manager, Global Alliances, Service Providers and Startups, India at Dell Technologies. Sudiip is an experienced business leader, a strategist and mentor with a track record of crafting winning go-to-market strategies and delivering exceptional results from them through high-performance leadership teams. As a key member of the senior leadership team at Dell, Sudiip has 18 plus years of experience in creating business value and delivering stellar revenue growth in various leadership roles. And last but not the least, let's welcome our moderator for today's discussion, Apalak Ghosh, founder and chief analyst at Teal. Apalak has over 18 years of experience in research and consulting and is an expert in various enterprise technology areas, focusing on the Indian market. Apalak, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much. A very warm welcome, Sudeep, Sakshi, Rajat. Pleasure hosting all of you today. Right, and it's always a pleasure to speak to all you successful collaborators, entrepreneurs in your own right. So much to learn from each one of you. We are a fairly new startup ourselves, so I think this next 45 to 50 minutes gives a lot of understanding of how to approach markets, how to look at work, and how work is transforming itself as we go forward. Right. So while we've had a stellar round of introductions, probably so I'll jump right in, and to make this conversation as dynamic as can, please feel to jump in whenever you feel you've got your story to tell. All of them very compelling because I've spoken to all of you in the past. So probably I'll start with the lady in the house. Sakshi, warm welcome. Great to have you with us. You know, you've kind of pioneered the entire mobility space, right? In at least the way we look at mobility now, right? And I strongly believe, when we talk about startups, I think of this film industry, and I'll tell you why. It is very popularly said that people look at the glamour and glitz of stars. They don't see the hard work which goes behind that. I think so is the case for startups. There are many startups which start but fail to gravitate to the next level, right? So we actually have very few successful startups, as to say, right? But when one does that, and when you actually achieve a certain scale, a certain feat of success, we've seen that you essentially disrupt the market that you operate in, right? How does this, actually change the status quo of the way you work? Like, for instance, you've been in our previous discussion, as we all know, you've had, various instances of working with very large organizations, global MNCs, and now you have your own entity to work with. How have you seen how you work as an individual and as an organization leader change over the years? Sakshi, over to you.
Thank you, Apalak. Very, very happy to be here, and I have not heard the film industry as a parallel to startups before, so this is a new one, and I think I'm going to use it. But I think if you look at the way startups have originated, and I think over the last couple of decades, there has been a lot more glamorization of the word startups, and the idea of being an entrepreneur has been glamorized to a large extent. It was essentially a hardworking job always, and it continues to be. Where it differs from starting out, I used to represent Hertz as a master licensee for India. I also built up a radio taxi brand, and then also sort of built up an operating lease brand in India, exited, sold that to a Japanese fund that was trying to enter India, and then started working on Myles, really. The idea, though, always was that there's a lot that I've learned. There's a lot that comes when you have all of this experience of organizations that have, Hertz, for example, is over 100 years old. The history is that long. There are a lot of other businesses that I have been a part of which have existed in the market for a very long time. And therefore, the time there was essentially not to understand how do you do work, but to understand how the industries work. So it's a generic understanding of the industry which is important. It's the understanding of the nuances of that segment which is important. As I further then try and build up an organization which is Myles today, that is trying to disrupt the vehicle ownership market, I know for a fact that there is just so much that already exists. For example, we don't sell cars and yet we do, right? So how do you change that? The general mindset of defining our business focus was, how do I change a person's mindset or my customer's mindset from saying I need to own a car to I need to be able to subscribe to a car for whatever time I need to. Now, before I did it for my customer, I needed to do it for the people who I wanted to work with. And that essentially happens when you start unlearning everything that you've learned and normalized for yourself over time. The fact that we are an organization that remains fairly smaller means that everyone gets an experience of every aspect of work. It's a lot more collaborative. It's a lot more. There isn't a silos in which anyone can work. We just can't afford to work in silos. It's that simple. And the moment that happens, collaboration becomes very, very critical. Um, Everyone having multiple skills becomes very critical. That whole right from the time we try and identify the right person to work with us to the way we induct them into the team is just really, really different when you look at the way we design work for ourselves. So yeah, I think those are some of the things that we do. One interesting example is we recently had somebody join in marketing, and one of the discussions that happened even before he joined was we have to give him an induction so that he gets really scared. But we just have to, right? We don't have an option. We need a marketing person. That person has to join in, and work has to be really, really. Work is all that is. When you enter the office space. So yeah, I think that sentiment, that temperament is what changes when you start working in a startup.
I like the way you put it, Sakshi, designing work. I mean, I'll take a cue from this and I'll take our example. We're a very small firm, right? Yet, we are in the process of rolling out certain offers. So we have an induction program lined up in the next month. I know, while you may be small, but you can think big. I think the future work, or when we talk about modernization work, it's how you look at things. I think very nicely said, when you said designing work culture. So I'll probably move from there, Sakshi, and I'll go to Rajat, from mobility to, to the space of banking, and so Rajat, I think this is an interesting take for you because you belong to a fairly rigid industry. With all due respect to all my friends in the banking sector, because we know how the banking sector operates. It's everyday office to begin with, right? It's everyday complete corporate clothing, corporate language. So it's a fairly tight-lipped and very tightly interior ship that they run, right? Now suddenly you have your own organization, Chqbook.com, which is a startup in every aspect, right? Doing wonderful work in its own area. I'm sure you see a stark difference in how you work, probably how you're achieving your results, maybe as effective, if not more, in your current organization. What is the fundamental difference between a typical large banking organization vis-a-vis how you run your own organization?
Right. Firstly, I just like to thank Apalak, you and Teal team for inviting me to this panel discussion, and really honored to have share this dais actually with Sakshi, who's a very well-known and very distinguished startup founder, and no longer a startup. Actually, she's now reached a much bigger stage than that. So coming back to to your question, right? What I feel actually is the biggest change would be the structure. Right, like you said, in a banking environment, the whole thing depends on the structure. There are structures are very rigid for the reason that it's a financial product. You need to have controls and checks in place, and that is where the whole banking industry kind of got built on a structure, and that is where actually we felt that there is a big need, and that is where the banks kind of are unable to score, and that is where the whole startup, the fintech industry came into being. Maybe because to change the structure, right, to not rely on the structure for checks and balances, but more on technology, more on nimbleness, right? So that is I think the fundamental difference that you need to have, that I've gone through. Very different. I'm wearing a t-shirt now. I'm very happy to move away from that rigid structure, right? You're absolutely right that I wore for 12 years. I've worn a shirt and a tie to office every day in and day out. You have to be properly dressed with a tie. Work through that environment, but that is the fundamental difference. I would feel that structures and teams also, right? There is a very clear cut organizational structure. There is very, very clear cut team structures that you have in the banking sector, and that is what you cannot work with in a startup culture, and you kind of have to move away from there, and because you're building something from scratch, and you do not have the luxury of creating a structure, because then that would kind of build up your costs, build in more again reduced flexibility, which is again increases nimbleness. The flexibility is needed for that nimbleness of a startup. So from that perspective, I would kind of again, Sakshi anyways it hit the nail on the head, listed down a lot of those things that are needed or for a startup to kind of how the ways of work have changed in a startup.
Rajat, I like the way you spoke about the shift and how structurally you are different. I think in my view, in my limited view of running a small organization, I think I think when you talk about the future, right, it's more power to the employee and ownership of an organization,
Absolutely.
where every employee feels as empowered as the owners of the organization. I think that is true empowerment. But I'll probably get Sudiip. Sudiip, we've heard very different converging views from Sakshi and Rajat, right? Because they come from different backgrounds. Sudeep, you speak and work with a whole lot of startups, right? And you have a very rich experience coming in. We hear a lot about this term called modern workplace or workplace of the future. My question to you is very simple. What makes a workplace modern? Over to you.
The work that we do today is demanded in much quicker time than it used to be, say, 5 years ago, and then before 5 years from then, and so on and so forth. Because of that, work today is a lot more collaborative to get to an outcome than it used to be, again, 5 years ago. That collaboration before the COVID world was primarily done in the physical domain because people used to come to work together, right? And COVID sort of threw it out of the basket, and now we had to invent. Technology showed, though, that collaboration can still be done, and that can be done at the pace required. And that, I think, is the origin of what we today call modern workplace, where you don't have to worry about where are you working from, on what are you working, as in a device, what kind of device, for example, and on which particular set of technology applications you're working on. If it's your email, is it your Outlook email or a Gmail or Lotus, whatever, right? Today's modern workplace defines that your work gets done independent of your system or the environment. I think that's the most or the seminal piece of modern workplace, which helps you collaborate. And sometimes to maybe answer that question comprehensively, think of how does work of a scientist get done versus a business analyst, and compare that 5 years ago and now, and you'll find that today's environment is actually bridging the gap and making both of them very empowered do their work.
Right.
I would probably stop here and saying this is my understanding of modern work.
This is very subjective, like I said, and the idea is to get all the ideas coming in. Sakshi, I'll come to you. And this is a question that is my favorite to a very large extent. Every successful startup originates with an idea. You want to change something. You see an opportunity, but before an opportunity, you see a change that is that could be big in scale, could be small in scale. But successful startups, are those who achieve that scale in operations, right? And they expand successfully. But as we all know, whenever you expand, there are instances where your morality, your ethics, are put into question, because it's never easy to run an organization. There's so much that comes in. You have people joining in. You have a lot of challenges that a lot of organizations face. I'll probably have Rajat and Sudeep also share their views on this. How do you balance, your desire to grow without compromising on the foundations of the organization? Sakshi, over to you.
Very interesting question. And the way I'd like to approach it first is just by explaining what was the ethos that we started in. The ethos for us was very simple. After spending so much time in solving transportation problems for different kinds of customers, I believe that the entire vehicle ownership problem needed to be solved in a bigger way. We went through challenges in various steps of our journey, right from the time that we were incubated. We first said, can we do it? Can we do vehicle ownership as shorter term, which means 1 or 2 days? Can we sell self-drive? Can we sell car sharing? Can we approach it from OEM partner perspective? Can we approach it from a variety of perspectives? In doing each of these things, I would say one of the things that was very, very important for me, and that is what we have maintained across the organization, has been that is our fundamental correct? Whatever step we are taking, are we continuing to solve for vehicle ownership? And this is true for a lot of other startups also that have expanded over time. The basic fundamental remains the same. If that basic fundamental is the same, then whatever challenges you may have in the course of your journey can either be treated as learnings, and you sort of figure it out and say, okay, here is something. I'm not sure if the moral compass has to be shifted in the journey of a startup entrepreneur. I don't particularly believe that's required. I think what's required is, in the journey of an entrepreneur, no matter what idea you're building, there will be a lot of challenges that will come through the way. The moral compass will be what it is for an entrepreneur. You make changes based on what your fundamental is. If your fundamental is that I want to solve for an X kind of problem that exists and it's large enough, then I will continue to solve for that problem. I will learn in the process. Right. So we learned in the process of solving for self-drive as a product, and we started with car sharing, and we said we will get individuals to be able to share their cars on our platform and give it for shorter terms. And we realized that that wasn't a scalable business. We over time moved to saying, no, actually there is a very large car market. There are over 7.5 million cars that are being sold in the country every year, which is, an ARR itself of about $50 billion that one can really approach it with. Now, if I have to reach out to that kind of a customer, I need to think differently. I need to get to the right kind of partners. I don't particularly believe that one really makes a change in the way or compromises on their moral compass. I think they learn in the process of what entrepreneurship is, which is an everyday discovery. As you become an entrepreneur, every day is a new discovery. Every day is a new understanding of your own mindset, of the way you react to things itself. And I think that's really what changes. That's really how you tackle any challenge that comes on the way. But you learn. You finally find your own normal. You find your own, process.
I like the process that you spoke about. Rajat, you want to add into this question, because you deal in the necessary evil, for lack of a better way of putting it. Money is one of the riskiest things to manage, and you are literally in the thick of it all, right? Coming from, like I said, from a banking sector to a fintech world, right? Which is, by the way, extremely regulated. I mean, fintech may sound cool, but still is governed by all the regulatory compliance norms that are laid down by the lay of the land, right? In such a scenario, right? And yet you need to be competitive, where you have a lot of investor money put in, and you've got to show the results. How do you balance all of it? This is where I get the huge challenge, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening in today would be keen to understand.
Sure. So what has happened is that Chqbook, what we basically knew from beginning, because when we was building up Chqbook initially, right, and we were just two of us, me and Vipul, and then Mohit joined later. What we initially knew was that the segment that we are addressing and what we are building has to scale and has a huge scale, has huge potential, and hence will be on a big scale eventually. So that is where initially we knew that if we have to start from the right perspective, we know that we'll have to dream big and kind of build the cup. So that basically means that the teams will be big teams that we'll have to build in, especially like you said that it's a regulated environment. So there are a lot of those challenges that you have to kind of build in different kind of teams with different skill sets. So that is where we knew that we are building something on scale, and hence we would have basically have more and more people coming in. So we have to build some culture there, right? And that is where we kind of focused on culture there. And how we do what it is, like what we did was that we basically thought, okay, let's first of all, let's be transparent, right? So first you basically build up his transparency in terms of the performance and incentives, right? That's the first thing that you do. Then the second thing that we tried to do was we empower, right? You empower your people. You don't just have a top-down vision. You just kind of get people in. They're all millennials, young guys. They are willing to kind of be very proactive. So you empower them, right? And make them, and empowering basically is for the agenda of getting them to have ownership, right? So once you empower them, that is how you're basically pushing them towards ownership of the whole structure or the whole piece of business. So these, and then obviously like what Sudiip also mentioned about is collaboration in the end, right? So, and then ensure the collaboration happens among the teams in the end. And that is what I feel that is what kind of how you build scale and how you kind of, how you kind of travel the path of creating a big scale in a fintech world. Where you have different aspects of business. It's every business, every line or every function plays a crucial part, and there are checks and balances. Like I said again, there are a lot of checks and balances for each function among each other.
Right.
So that is what I will.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Rajat. Sudeep, I come to you on another area that is very close to my heart because I've also worked with large entities, and now we work for a small setup ourselves. And when we at Teal define the future of work or a modern workplace, there are various ways of defining it, right? Clearly, like you said, very clearly, we're looking at a collaborative atmosphere, right? And hybrid work enables you to do that, But to make truly work environment hybrid, there are certain parameters. You ensure security, you ensure anytime, anywhere availability. But the softer elements to this, in my view, is A, making work sustainable, and B, making work more inclusive. I think that's a lot of discussions are happening in and around that. My question to you, Sudeep, personally and probably as a person working for a larger setup, how do you look at inclusive work culture? How do you imbibe that as an organization?
I think firstly by acknowledging that we are doing poorly at being inclusive and building an inclusive work culture. Not just this corporate, but the country as a whole, the government, the states and corporates and everybody. So that's the first thing. If you don't acknowledge, you probably are blind spotted.
Beautifully said. Right.
And then I think by setting outrageously ambitious goals, so that even if you falter on the way, you still would have moved the needle and made some progress. I'll tell you what, as an example, we have put some moonshot goals in Dell. And one of the moonshot goals in Dell is that by 2030, 50% or more of our staff will be diversity, women or different gender and etc. This comes from an organization which is less than 17% today on that count. So outrageous goals so that you work towards them. Then I would probably say that you start rewarding and over communicating inclusivity promoting behaviors in the workplace. even if those are small, because you start showing to the entire organization what are you rewarding, and hence what is the right cultural behavior. And it shows up in processes like, if you are hiring, you will have to look through x number of resumes, and unless you have filtered those, you can't move through to the other stage, etc. You'll have to keep certain number of positions only for diverse candidates, for example, right? So second thing is rewarding and over communicating the process. Third thing that I believe works as a very good catalyst is encourage your employees to drive this inclusion and change. At Dell, we have a plethora of employee-driven employee resource groups. Somebody is focusing on LGBTQ, somebody is focusing on women in corporate life, somebody is focusing on pride, for example, or let's say Hinduism, for example, or let's say celebrate Islam, whatever. When you make people free to choose what they like, you will find a lot of employees, a lot of people gravitate towards what they naturally believe in, and you will start getting inclusion, and if the tolerance builds in. And lastly, while you would have perhaps done this in your own organization, why don't you rub it off to other organizations? For example, we run certain projects and certain programs. For example, we have a Mentor Connect program where we are looking for cross-company mentoring of our women leaders. It's been a big hit. We have launched 6 of those cohorts last year. So we keep going to other organizations and saying, hey, this is a best practice. People have really felt good about it. And why don't you go do that? So what I'm saying is set very high goals, make people feel wanting to go do that, and rub it off to as many as you can in your organization as well as other organizations. Sorry, a long-winded answer, but I thought...
No, Sudeep, I would have loved to hear more from you on this, because there are certain questions which don't necessarily have a short answer. I like to believe this. I mean, this needs our efforts. But Sudeep, while I noted each and every point of yours, and theoretically they actually make a lot of sense, I'll probably get Sakshi and Rajat here, and I'll tell you why. Because they represent the startup community here. What Sudeep mentioned, I mean, kudos to him to really crystallize some of the very key elements of inclusivity. But in a real-time world where getting talent itself is a huge challenge, we know that we face that challenge on a daily basis, right? How do I imbibe these best practices, ensuring I also achieve my business results? It's not as easy as it is called out. I mean, how do we do that? But Sudeep, like I said, thank you so much for noting the important elements. Really, thank you for that. Sakshi, you want to take a dig at this, please?
Sure, and I think it was very interesting to hear from Sudeep as to what Dell is doing really in terms of inclusivity. Right. And my take on this, of course, is first of all, when you look at a startup environment per se, which is where I and Rajat are probably sitting right now, the idea of an organized format of developing inclusivity is a little less possible. What becomes more possible is to become aware of where can a gap arise out of, or where are we thinking wrong, or are we rationalizing certain thought processes for ourselves in a certain way, and try and omit those gaps. For example, are we fundamentally looking at certain positions? When you're a startup, you have a small team. You're really looking at people to join in. When you're asking them to join in, are you mentally saying, oh no, this role is meant for a X kind of individual, right? And then you start questioning yourself, but why not? Why can't, for example, it's a classic case in automotive for an industry, or as an industry, for example, the sales jobs are given to females. The front end sales jobs are given to females, even though, I mean, we actually have a lot of wonderful male representatives who are doing our, sales work really well. And I'm sort of reversing it because I probably I can. But just identifying where can you be biased is sort of the starting point for us. I think the other is to say, why are we being biased and can we solve for it in a certain manner? We have all come from backgrounds, whether we worked in large companies or not. Everyone comes from a certain background of how workplace was traditionally thought about. And workplaces traditionally were thought about for a certain kind of in majority a certain kind of workforce. The moment you start getting others in place, you start realizing how wonderful it is actually to have diversity and inclusivity. And this is not just in gender or in religion, etc., but also in so many, in having people from different regions, for example, having people from different kinds of backgrounds, for example. All of this adds up to making a more smarter thinking organization, is what I feel. And I think that's what we recognize for ourselves, first of all. Because the moment you have more minds, more different thought processes going into the same idea, you start thinking better. Because then you're thinking of a larger market, you're thinking of a larger product.
I mean, it's actually, what I take from what you just said, is a cue for me at least, is how you look at a particular thing. For instance, if you look at an EV as good for the environment, probably it's not compelling for me, because I really don't, it's not my job to take care of the environment. That's a typical individual way. But if you tell me, hey, you know what, I'll give you an EV which helps you not just care for the environment, but helps you save money and the performance better than any petrol or diesel engine.
That's been the ethos of the climate tech space altogether.
Exactly.
Sorry to break you. Yeah.
No. That's exactly what I said. So I think how you confront a situation is how you benefit out of it. Like you said, if inclusivity is beneficial for the organization, I think it changes the dimensions of how you look at it. Rajat, you have through your organization, you work with, you work across tiers, A, tier 2, 3, 4, and gone and beyond, right? So you're empowering a lot of people, right? I'm sorry if I'm calling this out, but when we talk about, issues around inclusivity, ESG, they remain the confines of the upper middle class urban metro discussions. But to get true impact, it's very important that these discussions are reached beyond that, where and the market that you serve. What is your take on this?
Yeah, so I actually second Sakshi totally, fully, right. What she said was very true on how startups really don't think about it, and kind of it comes on its own in some way. And she talked about gaps and bias, right? And I would basically would say that, what she basically was saying, that what we have is a cognizance of bias, right? So basically the first step is basically that you have to be cognizant that there will be a bias and that bias will exist. And then you have to kind of be very cognizant and then take steps to address that. That's one. Secondly, on the overall this thing, I feel that we are very lucky now in this present context, that we are in the present life that we are living in the present times, that with all these new technologies and work from home and all, inclusivity has become really simple and easier to achieve. Third, women generally now are also being supported a lot by their families. They are very professionally focused, right? So that itself is again a good mover towards having more inclusivity with them, right? So there are various factors. Like I said, it's not only internal, there are external factors at play, which are, I think, in the right direction now in India especially. And so that is exactly, I feel, shaping a lot of things what we do in inclusivity. In terms of policies too, right? The POSH policy, for example, is a great example, is a very big example. I feel that, and we have a very clear POSH policy in our company. We have a proper committee around it. So we kind of follow the whole process around these policies, and not just have those policies on paper somewhere. Those are actively pushed, actively propagated inside the company for so that and that kind of promotes inclusivity, again, more and more inclusivity. Another 2-3 things that we kind of talk about what we can do is build in humility and empathy, right? That's another 2 culture, again, a very culture driven things, and that is how you kind of also, if you are able to try that slowly, gradually, kind of just keep on building on that, that itself will bring in a lot of inclusiveness on its own, because people will feel, a lot of jobs, a lot of people join companies through references, right? Especially in today's environment, where they look at all these, they have platforms available where they look for reviews and all. So from that perspective, I feel if you are able to build that culture, inclusivity will just set in on its own. People will start to kind of come in. Female employees will refer their own friends, or whatever other community people will refer their friends, and hence the inclusivity will kind of build in. And that is where we feel, and even in our customers, also it also gets driven by the customers, right? The segment that we deal in, which is small business owners. So like 30 to 40, 35% of our customers actually are women, small business owners, right? So we have to build an inclusive culture, because so that we understand a segment in and out, and we can service all people, all kind of customers in our segment that we have, right? So from that perspective, also this becomes very important.
I think very, very succinctly pointed out, Rajat. I think, the fundamental shift is the shift in the culture. It's shift in the mindset, right? But I'll move this conversation on. Sudeep, I'll bring you in. A lot of discussions of how successful startups operate, how nimble they are, how agile they are. But I also like to believe, because there's a lot to learn from larger organizations as well. I'll take Dell's example, which is a fairly large organization, yet at its core has kept its startup foundations intact. At the same time, it has managed to have many processes in place to ensure that your day-to-day operations are set in order. So what are some of the key learnings that you'd like to probably share with our friends here, which any startup should probably imbibe in their culture as they grow, which is a learning from, say, a large established organization like Dell or other organizations that you worked with in the past, Sudeep?
Well, I'm just thinking, but one thing I find a lot from startups is that, hey, that's a large organization culture and ours is a startup.
Right.
So process is a large organization thing, we are a startup. Now I'll tell you some practical things, okay? Processes in large organizations are built around a few fundamentals. One, that decisions are not people dependent, they become independent and hence consistent. Second, information is available as per rights, and again, not people dependent but consistent. Almost every scenario that can probably happen is thought through and SOPs built. So there is no surprise when things come up, and responses are again consistent, be it a newcomer who has joined you or be it somebody who's an old timer. And workflows are thought through in a framework and by experts, so that there is a high degree of confidence of what the workflow does as an outcome is a very satisfying, high yield outcome, right? So if you follow processes contrary to the public sentiment, I think institutionalizing that kind of a culture gives you a lot much more independence and nimbleness than the other way around. The problem lies in designing bad processes or unthought through, or maybe very, very less thought through processes, and sticking with rigidity on implementing those. Now, this is where larger organizations and even smaller ones have I think the key lies in design thinking of processes.
Right.
You have design thought your processes, that nimbleness and agility exists. And today, SaaSization of many applications, be it an ERP or be it, let's say, Salesforce.com and others, have shown how design thinking can help have the same processes help a larger organization and a smaller organization also, in different t-shirt sizes.
Right.
So my biggest probably message to people would be that don't have a phobia about this works only in the larger organizations. Ultimately, you are craving to become a larger organization with those kind of profit pools, right? You better imbibe what makes sense in becoming large.
Yeah, I'll probably I'll stick to the analogy that I started with when I spoke to Sakshi about how I look at the glamour industry with the startups. So it's like, like you said, you clamor for becoming big. So I mean, it's like every movie star. You cannot shun the light if that's what you worked so hard for all your life. So I think I concur with what you said. Sakshi, I'll come to you. And I'll relay back to my first question. Point when I said that when you started this organization, there was an opportunity/challenge that you saw, which led to the success. But success in turn leads to a whole new set of challenges. It could be in terms of managing employees, security, compliance, social consciousness, and so on and so forth. As a founder, how do you manage to stay on top of things, and maybe especially emphasis on issues, for instance, around security? Because eventually what happens when you are growing, it does not necessarily tend to remain as a top concern. But if you are unfortunately hit by a cybersecurity issue, you come to a grinding halt. How do you manage that? What are your takes on this?
Absolutely. And I would actually pick up on what Sudeep said and try and actually say that while every organization aims to become larger and better and to be able to follow the principles that large organizations have done, I think the set of priorities that you set at every stage of your growth is different. And therefore, it's not that processes cannot be set, but I don't think startups at an early stage can afford to set up the kind of processes that are set by larger entities. But obviously, I think the goal is to be able to reach that stage where you can have teams dedicated and a lot of work, a lot of intensive work happening on a variety of spaces. Having said that, I think from a perspective of challenges from where we started and where we were, and I'll give you an example just from our product perspective, and I think that'll tell you how we've sort of moved. When we started off, one of our biggest challenges in providing cars on subscription to individuals who didn't exactly own the car was, what does this person just run away with the vehicle? It was as simple as that. I mean, it was just that simple. That was the one question that everyone was asking us. And we said, okay, let's focus on technology. Let's focus on insurance. Those are the two elements that can actually help in helping us protect the asset itself. So we invested a lot in IoT. We invested a lot in insurance products. We worked in integrating and enabling insurance companies to be able to get better data from our vehicles so that they can provide us far more superior products than what exists in the market. As we move forward, we realized that not only was it important to protect the asset just the asset, we also needed to make sure that as we were improving our product and we were actually moving to subscriptions, which is where the car was really under the supervision of the customer for at least 6 to 12 months. In that scenario, we needed to make sure that we were reaching out to the right kind of customer. There, we started implementing smarter tools with respect to enabling customer verifications in terms of enabling the credit verifications of customers. We started partnering with organizations that could help us in collecting data about various customer segments and various areas, introducing smarter elements even as far as our IoT was concerned, the devices that went inside the car to understand customer behavior. And so for us, it has always been, how can we improve technology to improve security? We do run a product where the asset sits with the customer for a very long time. So security for us is paramount, not just of the asset, but also of the customer. When you're driving on the road, all sorts of scenarios could happen. So the two aspects that have worked for us is investing heavily on technology and investing heavily in partnerships and collaborations with service providers of various kinds.
Right.
So whether it's insurance companies, whether it's roadside assistance companies, whether it's physical verification companies, whether it's applications that can help us remotely check the health of a vehicle, all of those things. So that's really what we do.
So Sakshi, thank you so much. You've shown us how you've integrated technology to achieve what you started off. Sudeep, while in Sakshi's case, she spoke about what we in our industry parlance talk about perimeter of physical security, right? But as we all know, when we speak about this anytime anywhere work flexibility, somewhere devices have been a key instrument of doing that. Today, to run an organization successfully, I mean, while there are many other backend infrastructure to support that, but at the front end, all you really need is a good device and a connectivity to let things work. In such a scenario, how do you see the relevance and importance of security, especially for the startup community?
It's a brilliant question. 95% plus of all security incidences happen through the interactive device that an employee uses to work. Add that in Indian context, in the last 2 years, the number of threats per hour received by Indian businesses has tripled. And COVID especially saw a boom in such things. And today, fraud and ransomware put together as an industry is a $3 trillion industry, which is much bigger than India's aspirational GDP ambitions today. So this is that bigger, an organized industry, sometimes state-sponsored too. So yes, this particular interface of the device is something which is very paramount to manage for anybody, and for startups the vulnerabilities are high because there is not a lot of scrutiny of firewalling of this interaction. But the good thing is there's something that has now come up in the last maybe 6 months or maybe a year, something called a zero trust framework, which means trust no one.
Right.
Secure everything, check credentials often, and the good thing is it's a framework, it's not a product. On that framework, you can build up the levels of security that you want, make it stricter and make it maybe perhaps whatever you want. If you're a smaller organization, go through simpler checks. If you're bigger organizations, you build things around access control in those. So with this context, I would probably say that startups probably can choose from open source architectures to maybe branded products to make them secure, knowing fully well that most of the threats are going to come from this interface that employees use. And employees today in the COVID world of a distributed work culture called hybrid, using laptops whichever way, keeping them open while the family is available, whatever, are a lot much more vulnerable to phishing and other things. So devise your security strategy on a framework that is tested and build it as per your capability, probably is the best guarantee today of being cyber secure.
So thank you. I mean, you touched upon zero trust, and like you said, it's an emerging area. Some people who know about it get to confuse it with a product, which is not. It's a framework that it's not a one size fits all. It depends entirely on how you operate, what is your scale of operations, your perimeter of touch points. Sudeep, thank you so much for that. I'll probably like to conclude today's call because I'm fairly conscious about the fact that we are almost touching the 50-minute mark. I'll have one last question to all of you, and I'll probably start with Rajat. I'll move to Sakshi, and then I'll request Sudeep to conclude this. One common question to all of you: what is your idea of the future of work? That's all.
I feel the future of work, obviously, it will get impacted a lot by AI, automation. right? Big data, cloud computing, right? Those are the big things that are coming in. They've been coming in and they'll become more and more prevalent and relevant in the way we do things. But then the good thing is that what happens with technology is that it provides new challenges, but it also provides new solutions. So that is where I feel that we'll continue to kind of grow on that. A future of work is very exciting. It brings in a lot of innovation. It'll keep on bringing innovation, and that is what startups are known for. That's what they thrive on, the innovation. Another thing, obviously, the future of work is becoming very modular, is what I feel, that a lot of things are in modular shape now. So you kind of build one thing and then build another thing. Again, modular in terms of workspaces, in terms of technology, in terms of structures, everything, right? So again, that is another what I see is the future of work.
Hey, thank you so much, Rajat. Sakshi, you've given some great points. I'll probably request you to do the same as you conclude.
So I completely agree with Rajat on all the points that he mentioned. I think I definitely believe that future of work will be a lot more remote, a lot more collaborative. As he mentioned that as AI and the chat GPTs of the world go ahead and change the way we are solving for problems, I think one of the important skill sets or strategic inputs that will come from humans will be how to go from 0 to 1, because AI can help you to go from 1 to 100. Somebody has to go from 0 to 1 to get it to that stage, and I think that's really what I would say would be the important input that we will have to skill ourselves for.
I mean, I couldn't have put it better. I mean, even for chat GPT to work, you have to input something. It can't just start operating on its own. I love that point, Sakshi. I'll take this cue. Sudeep, you've had some very, very fresh thoughts for all of us to imbibe and share. I'll request you to conclude in your own fashion.
Well, I think work of any kind in the future will be very heavily pivoted on technology and its use. And if you look at how people will work, perhaps to me it is a marriage of Star Trek and Minority Report. And everybody probably would be a Tom Cruise in the future. And I think that's where we are heading, much more smarter with a pivot to technology.
I mean, brevity is the soul of wit, as they say, Sudeep. We couldn't have put it more succinctly and sharply. Thank you so much, Sakshi, Rajat, Sudeep. It's been a pleasure. I hope for all of our friends who are listening to this, they gain a lot. I personally did. Like I said, because we at Think Teal have started this journey fairly recently. I take back a lot of points that you've shared with me and hopefully make our organizations more adept to face what we have for the future. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to all of you. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you. I enjoyed my time with all of you, and all of you have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great speaking to everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much, Sakshi, Rajat, and Sudeep for your valuable inputs, and thank you, Apalak, for moderating that session. That was an incredibly insightful discussion and highly beneficial to our listeners. Some truly great points on inclusivity and your perspective on how work will evolve in the future. So moving on, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to briefly provide you with some more details about Dell for Startups initiative. Dell for Startups provides expertise from dedicated technology advisors and scalable solutions to ensure a startup is always ready to grow. In addition, Dell Technologies is strongly invested in the Indian startup ecosystem to help them innovate and grow. To help startups stay ahead of the curve, the program offers a comprehensive end-to-end support system. So here's a quick video on how Dell supports startups in their growth journey. Take a look at the video.
मौका भी तू मंजिल भी तू हार कर भी जीत चख ले तू हो जा तू शुरू शुरू शुरू
आज का इंडिया गिव अप नहीं स्टार्टअप करता है नाइस
छोटी छोटी कदमों से ही होती है शुरुआत कहीं अटक गए तो हल चलाए हो गए फिर से शुरू।
जो सपनों की राह चले तो समझो मंजिल पा ही गए।
अगर किसी भी तरीके की बीमारी है तो आपको
डॉक्टर,
एक
हौसले से हम साथ बढ़े, उम्मीद बस यही रखते हैं।
टीम छोटी है पर फोकस पूरा है। आज ठहर गए तो क्या, कल नई कोशिश का इरादा रखता है।
आज का इंडिया गिव अप नहीं, गिव इट ऑल का एटीट्यूड रखता है। अपने स्टार्टअप को सक्सेस बनाने तक नहीं रुकता है।
And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have a QR code that you can see on your screen. You can use it to download the details of Dell for Startups program. I'll give you a quick 15 seconds to download this brochure. So ladies and gentlemen, we had a great discussion and I'm sure that you all enjoyed the session a lot, had some great takeaways as well. Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us, and we look forward to bringing you more exciting and knowledge-based discussions in the future as part of the series. Stay safe and have a great day ahead.